All right, we are live. Welcome to Kite Talks. We have a gentleman all the way from the UK in Portsmouth, Sarthak Mondal. He's the lecturer in sport economics at University of Portsmouth. Also a PhD scholar at Sheffield Hallam University. Sarthak, thank you for taking the time out and looking forward to this conversation.
No worries, Arup. Good to speak to you. It's always good to speak to you.
Awesome. So, like as you know, in a lot of our interviews, we talk about the business side, we talk about sports management. I know your focus has been very much on the academic side, and we would love to kind of dive into that world. But what we'll try and do is break this interview of about 30 minutes into two halves. The first half, let's try and I would love to know your journey. Love to know where you started. How did you end up? Where you are, and maybe some anecdotes along the way, and then we can head to the second half, which is more on the academic side and what you're doing currently.
I mean, it's quite funny actually looking back how I have ended up here because, like, even when I started studying sport management, working as an academic or doing a PhD was not something I would have thought of, and that's not something a lot of students would think of essentially. My initial idea when I started sport management was to probably work as some sort of in managerial position for a Premier League club or a championship club, or even clubs back in India, because the franchises
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
different leagues that we have in India. I would say that India is kind of the sporting league capital of the world because the number of leagues we have got, it's just amazing.
True, true.
Uh, but again, in second year, when I was doing some part-time work with the Sport Industry Research Center that's based in Sheffield Hallam, and I worked with them working on a project for Boxing England, finding out why do people from deprived communities take part in boxing? How does boxing benefit them? What's the social impact of those boxing gyms that exist in different deprived areas in the country, in the UK? Seeing the social side of it, but also doing some research from an economic perspective, playing around with Microsoft Excel, essentially trying to find like what does the league table actually show us apart from just the points? What does the financial situation show us? Is there any links between financial performance and sporting performance? I slowly got interested in the research side of it, and midway through the second year, uh, I basically figured out that I was good enough at research that I can have a career and make a living out of it. So during the second year, during Christmas, uh, away from home in the UK, I didn't have a social life, so I thought about doing some data analysis on some competitive balance in Asia. We'll talk about that paper later because although that's probably not the best paper I have ever written or the best paper I will ever write, that still is substantive way of me getting into academia, getting into research. And that was just a second year side project working for the research methods module, which got converted into a full paper, which
Hmm.
then now supervisor, Dr. Robinson and Dr. Dan Plumley, they presented that paper in the European Association of Sport Management Conference. I presented that paper as a final year undergraduate student in the Football Collective Conference in 2019. And by the time I graduated out of my sport management degree, I believe I had two academic papers, two journal papers, and one book chapter in the back pocket, which was a way to basically, you can say, make my candidacy look good on paper for the PhD. And
Correct.
also, speaking about PhD, I would like to go back a lot more further. I'm sure a lot of people from India who might have watched Family Man, which is a TV series. And there is this girl who joins the department, and I believe Manoj Bajpayee asks her like, why are you doing this? And she basically says, I was studying engineering and then I realized, what am I doing? And it's kind of the same with me. And I believe it's similar with 70 to 80% of people who are studying engineering in India, and whether be it in IITs or NITs or any tier two or tier three private colleges or state government colleges. A lot of them do not do engineering or medical or law, for instance, because they love it, but because they were
Somebody told them
forced
to
to
do
do it.
it. Yeah.
And they have been taught that those three are kind of the only respectable career options that they have. And that was like pre 2015. Now, what we are seeing is a lot of young kids, young adults trying to take charge of their own life, trying to find out what they are trying to do. And that's essentially a good thing. So, I mean, it's exactly like 10 years back when I joined my computer science degree in a college in Kolkata. Uh, and 3.5 years down the line, I basically decided that this is not something what I want to do. And this is not, so I don't want to spend my life basically working in TCS or Cognizant. As a computer science engineer, I might be open to working with them on a sports consultancy based role,
Fair enough.
but not as a computer science engineer because that's not something where I see myself working. Uh, and then basically, I left my engineering degree. Uh,
How did that work out for you at home?
I mean, it was basically just telling my parents that I don't want to do it. And even if you throw me out of home, I mean, I will find a way of making a living, but this is not something that I want to do. There was, of course, pressure of finishing the degree.
Yeah.
But the thing that worked out is on the background, I was working on application process for different universities in the UK. So I applied for 5 universities in the UK, and I got through into all of them without having a sport management background. And the only reason for Sheffield going to Sheffield Hallam and studying there substantively is two things. First of all, the Transform Together scholarship that they offered, which was basically uh, lifting a huge financial burden in terms of the tuition fees.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, back at the time when I went to Sheffield Hallam, the course was led by Rob Wilson, of course, and it was probably the best sport management curriculum within the UK at that point in time because you had those very basic sport management modules and management modules for that
Mm-hmm.
matter at the very first year. But from your second year, you can basically choose your own pathways. You can either choose to do, for example, choose to do finance and marketing or events and facilities and sports development, and you can kind of define your own degree. And I
Yeah.
ended up designing my degree with, you can say, electives in sports facilities management and sports financial management. And that came handy when I interviewed for my PhD and basically didn't do a master's. So from an engineering dropout to not doing a master's and getting selected for a PhD, that to right between the pandemic when I would say the financial situation of different universities wasn't at its strongest point.
Yeah.
Uh, that was amazing. I mean, that was overwhelming because, of course, the jump is not twofold or threefold. The jump, I would say, is like going from undergrad to PhD is like 9 or 10 fold. And
Yeah.
in 4 or 5 months, I had to basically prepare myself for the next journey.
Mm-hmm. No,
And
amazing, man.
yeah, and also like I'm sure like I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn and they ask me like, "Oh, I want to do a PhD in sport management," and I'm just putting it out there for everyone who is listening. There is nothing called a PhD in sport management, or a PhD in sport economics, or a PhD in sport finance. It's basically like you have to come up with a topic. You have to research a very intricate topic. Look, so like for example, when you study in undergrad or your postgrad, you are basically like studying everything,
Yeah.
becoming a generalized specialist for that matter. But
Correct.
when you are basically doing a PhD, you are basically picking up for example, a needle in a haystack and basically just specializing on the composition of that needle, probably. And again, PhD is not just about research. It's a lot of confusion about questioning your philosophical stances because, as the degree says, it's of course a doctorate, but it's not a doctorate in sport economics or something. It's a doctorate in philosophy. So, what are your philosophical stances and how do you see things? And of course, if I look at it, it might look very vague, but in terms of what we do, how we do things, everything that has been defined by our lived experiences of how we have grown up, what our upbringing has been, the friends we have had, the social circles we have had, and that in a way kind of influences your research as well. So you have to intertwine that part of your life into your research and basically justify everything what you are doing.
No, it's really interesting that I mean, the specialization bit that you bring up, and I'm glad you, like, you mentioned early on, like, once you are doing your program is when you also kind of realized that research is something that you like doing and that you could actually make a living doing that. So I think for a lot of some of the young listeners or students, I mean, it's on some level you have to, well, jump into the deep end to really see whether you'd want to swim to the shallow or swim further deep. Uh, it's an
Yeah,
interesting
I
space.
mean, like you have to when you are a student, and this is basically to all the universities in India as well. Like, let students do stuff. I mean, else they wouldn't know what they want to do in their life. When, so the very first kind of internship or part-time job I had was as a strength and conditioning intern in the Academy of Sport and Physical Activity in Sheffield Hallam University, working with high performance athletes. Figured out I didn't want to do that. Then I was volunteering part time, uh, looking after the sport programs. And on the back of that, I got funded to do my coaching badges. I tried my hand at coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't say I was bad at it, but it's not something I saw myself doing 20, 30 years down the line. I tried research just to see if I like it, and there was time. So I enjoyed doing it. And I'm like, yeah, this is something I want to do. So the students try as much things as possible,
Yeah.
and to the teachers just let them try it. I mean, of course, shouldn't hamper their examinations and everything, but they want to try it. Probably even as a lecturer, for example, say if someone has got an internship for 8 weeks, 3 days a week for Mumbai Indians in Mumbai, and that
Mm-hmm.
means them missing one class a week. I say that's absolutely fine because he's bringing a lot of practical experience that's not just going to benefit him, but also benefit the teaching and development of that class because he's going to feed back into the class what he has learned. And that's sometimes teachers do not realize while trying to emphasize what they are trying to teach.
Yeah, no, that's so very true. Um, and I'm glad you brought up the whole side of having an internship, working, do as many things as you'd want to do while you're pursuing a particular degree. How does one now? I mean, you're focused on a certain body of research, diving deep into sort of the academic side. How do you bridge the gap between um, the whole practical aspect of sport and at the same time, okay, you're doing the research? How does that how does that correlate? And as an academician, how do you ensure that some of this information is utilized on ground, you know?
I mean, so for example, as a researcher, when I'm doing some research on sport, of course, like you do some stuff like those very basic competitive balance stuff or anything. But when you are doing some, for example, say substantive research, you are trying to find out what affects certain things. You kind of send them to the governing bodies as well, or you maybe try and work in conjunction with the governing bodies
Mm-hmm.
to basically build up those areas. So, for example, uh, I believe you had Taruka Srivastav as well once upon a time on
Yeah.
the Sky
Yeah.
Talk show. So me and Taruka, so me in my capability as a researcher and she in her capability as within the industry, we basically collaborated on the research with Fair Street Sports, which basically hosted the MotoGP in India,
Yeah.
to evaluate the economic impact of how much, what did the positive and negative impacts from an economic and social standpoint that MotoGP had on the local community in Greater Noida. So, for example, like you can throw a sports stadium anywhere, you can throw a sports facility anywhere, but if it is not benefiting the local community, what's the entire point of having that?
Correct.
So again, not just that. Again, going back to my work, part-time work when I was working on Boxing England, it was actually a project that was funded by Sport England and Boxing England, contracted to the Sport
Mm-hmm.
Industry Research Center to find out like what should be the new policies of Boxing England to improve participation in deprived communities. And a lot of good things came out of that research. A lot of that things have been published by the Sport Industry Research Center
Yeah.
as well. Uh, the guys at Sport Industry Research Center, they do a lot of research with the PGA Tour as well, uh,
Mm-hmm.
evaluating the economic impact. Uh, so there are like sort of world leading experts sitting in those areas. Something I wouldn't say I'm a world leading expert or even an expert in those. I'm just trying to learn it. I'm like 5 years into my journey as a researcher, 2 years as an academic. But if we can do some of those stuff in India, because the plethora of sporting leagues and sporting competitions that happen in India,
Yeah.
not just at a national level, but even at a regional level. So, for example, take the football leagues in Kolhapur,
Mm-hmm.
attracting huge amount of crowds. Take the seven-a-side football that happens in Kerala,
Yeah.
nighttime football. Uh, so there is of course a social and an economic aspect to all of this, but as long as we can't evaluate how much that is benefiting the community, we can't if we can't quantify it for that matter,
Yeah.
we can't, for example, say and go and ask the government to put some funding in it. Because if the government says that there is a huge social impact of those events, reduces crime, gets the youth involved, uh, brings in economic and brings in tourism as well, they might be willing to invest. There might be investment for CS from CSR initiatives of different corporates as well
Yeah.
within those tournaments. And I think these sport leagues at some point need to take a step back. I mean, I am sure they are the experts in what they do, else they wouldn't be doing it, or they might have l- got a not a lucky break. You need to be lucky to do anything in life. You need to be at the right place at the right time at the right moment. If those three things do not align, you just can't do it. Uh, take a step back and look at what they have learned in theory and how can they benefit from different research going around the world, and if they can implement some of that, basically protect or influence some of the funding for their league into research to make it a better league. So for example, Indian Super League would really benefit with a lot of research at policy level, because
Yeah.
uh, the number of clubs that have gone bust in Indian football, the number of clubs that are relocating
True.
or not able to pay their players in the Indian Super League as well. So why is this going wrong? And it's not just that it's happening something like the last 1 year or so because of COVID. It's something that has been happening since 1996 from when I was 2 years old. So
Yeah.
it's something that needs to be researched. And of course, like people within the business industry, and this is not a dig to them. They can, of course, do the research, but I don't think unless you have that sort of academic background where you know how to take a step back and sit within it deeply, you
Yeah.
are going to kind of get any form of real findings from that research. Like, let's be very honest, producing three or four pie charts and showing two or three numbers is not research. I mean, that's just not research according to me.
Yeah, fair enough. No, no, and I'm glad you bring this up from an Indian context, and the fact that I mean, we both sort of understand how the whole education system functions in different parts of the world. And you're completely right. I mean, even my project during my master's, my final year research, we worked closely with the NHL at that time when we were doing we were looking at the positive and negative aspect of the media in North America, and it was, like you said, it was research. It wasn't, I mean, it was really deep dive into 10 years of what media coverage exists, and really going into journals, going into history. And I think that what you mentioned is key, which is it needs to, one is, have some parallel aspect, and of course you have to work with the bodies to ensure that there is some use of some of this research. And but going into sort of the coming back to the Indian context, um, there's a lot that can be done, and I know that there's a lot from a
Let's
sports
just
management and academic
make
side. I'm not sure if the programs here are focused that much on it, but how do you think we could change that? How do you think we could sort of uh,
this is something
improve the
I
system here?
this is something I teach my level 4 students who just have come in from
Yeah,
A level, from their class 12th to the university. But this is also something which I have done throughout my teaching career, which is very short, 3 years now, almost, at Sheffield Hallam when I was teaching not students who are not studying sport management. So although I'm teaching in sport management, my teaching journey didn't start in sport management. I used to teach financial management and business analysis to students who were studying food and nutrition management. Then I
interesting.
used to teach students who are studying international business, strategic management, and financial management. And I used to teach a module called International Financial Markets, which has got nothing to do with sports. But one of the students was kind enough that he did an assignment on uh, the media rights of Premier League being in a financial bubble, and it was very fascinating to read.
Yeah,
Uh, but when we teach first years, when they come to university, and let's be very honest, let's put it here. I mean, research is hard. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of dedication, but it's not rocket science.
yeah,
Anyone can do it. And the first thing when you start doing your research is you have to basically try and forget all your preconceived notions about a subject area. So the first thing I on slides when I start teaching research methods or any module uh, is written is accept nothing, question everything that you see. I mean, just because somebody has defined what a mega event is or
yeah,
what sports development is doesn't mean I have to accept the definition. I can look about on my research different research papers, there will be like 70 or 80 different definitions. I mean, it's not like an universal truth like the earth is round and the uh,
yeah,
sun rises in the east. It's a these are statement of facts, like what the definition of a sport event is. Like, you can of course define it in your own way. And if you want to do research, what I think needs to be developed among Indian students from an Indian perspective is the aspect of critical thinking. In India, we have this very bad thing about mugging off from chapters, accepting what has been taught, and
yeah,
just going to the exams or writing essays, just vomiting it.
Yeah.
And that's not just a problem with Indian colleges, that's a problem with Indian students studying in the UK, in the US, in other parts. And this is true. I mean, like, I don't care where what you have studied, the definition of sports development. I don't give a rat's ass about it, to be honest. You can beep that part out. What I want to understand is, yeah, I have studied five definitions. What do I understand about sport development
Correct.
from it? What do I understand what a sports event is about it? And that's the very first step if you want to become a good researcher. I mean, like, you have to start questions. Like, for example, I wouldn't take the name of the journal. It's it's run by an Indian university, a sport management journal. I have read some of the papers there, and honestly, and this is not just quoting me, this is quoting my supervisors as well and other professors as well. I mean, you could probably write those papers over a cup of coffee, and those are not real research because uh, there hasn't been any thought process that has been put behind those what they are trying to do. I mean, like, again, uh, coming from a very academic, for example, I am saying, okay, why do you want to do a research on the financial health of Indian Super League? If you come and give me the answer, no, because no one has done it. No, that's not right, not the right answer. If someone hasn't done it, doesn't justify the need for you to do it. Probably the right answer is there are financial problems. 22 clubs have gone bust in 26 years. Might be something is going wrong, makes it a very different case study. Probably we should research it and try to find out what is going on exactly. That's probably, I wouldn't say not the right answer, probably a better answer than saying no one has done it. Just because no one has done it doesn't mean that it needs to be done. I mean, like, no offense, you are not going to, for example, go and research competitive balance in the Taiwan Premier League because no one cares about it, and no one cares. People in Taiwan probably care about it, but there hasn't been anything wrong or right that has gone on those leagues over
Hmm.
the years. It has just gone on at a steady pace. There's no news about it, so it doesn't attract that research interest. So again, you have to start questioning from a very critical standpoint. Think about what you want to do and why you want to do it. I mean, so specifically, that's something. And I don't think that you need a separate. I mean, of course, it would be good to have a dedicated research module for those students, but I think that can be embedded and implemented across all modules, across all levels, trying to implement that critical thinking among students.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, I mean, that's when you're running an event or when you're part of some management team. I mean, that's exactly what is needed, right? Questioning everything, the critical thinking. It's not all about skimming. And I think as
Again,
an
like,
as
I
yeah,
will
go ahead.
just break you. When you say
Sure, sure, sure.
questioning everything, I mean, that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to reinvent the wheel. When I say
Correct.
question everything, you mean like what has been given. Uh, is there a different way of interpreting it, maybe?
Yeah,
Just that. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
sometimes you might need to reinvent the wheel because something is not working. But I mean, like, I see all those young professionals coming on LinkedIn. "Ah, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to do that." No one is going to change the world. You are not going to do it. You might do it. And if you are do it, I am very happy for you if it improves the livelihood of people. But 99.99% of people, they are not going to change the world on their own. But what 99.99% people are going to do through their jobs is probably make a 0.1% contribution that is going to combine and change the world. So do not just focus on reinventing the wheel, focus on where you can improve yourself, what you can do better, how you can interpret things differently to do it better. And that's probably going to change the world rather than saying, oh, I want to do this is how I'm going to change the world.
As an academician, how's the advent of AI treating you? How's it? I mean, is that something that you are extremely positive about, students are using it or not, and how are the how are the universities kind of looking at it from at a
Uh,
policy level as well?
I mean, at the University of Portsmouth, we have got policies around AI, and I believe that's the case with most British universities and the US universities as well at this point. I mean, personally, for me, I am not against the use of AI. What I am against the use of is generative AI, where you are not putting in your own work to write something. You're
Right.
just asking the AI, write an essay on the financial analysis of Indian Super League for me. Uh, I mean, it's probably just going to paraphrase the paper that I have written, and I'm going to pick it up straight away that it's plagiarized. Uh, I mean, I encourage my students sometimes to use AI depending on what has been prescribed by the university within the laws of the university. You can't break those rules. You can't basically just generate some content from AI and say, this is my work. No, no, no. That's not going to work. Uh, Probably from AI, I mean, I am sure. I mean, we all have been using AI in the past. We all have been using Grammarly to
Yeah.
improve the word. That's an AI. So I mean, there are ways with which you can use AI to make things better, but also in terms of generative contents, I don't think that's going to benefit the students. And we are working on, like you can say, making our assessments kind of AI proof. Like we have got a lot of presentations and a lot of reports that are based on data that is available in the recent, not too back from the past, but very contemporary data, probably from 2 years back. And the questions are designed in such a way that the AI might be able to answer it, but as a tutor, you will be able to pick that up straight off because that critical thinking aspect is missing. I mean, it doesn't matter even if you ask ChatGPT, write in a critical thinking way. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an AI, it's not a human. It can think or critically think only on the basis of the information that it has, not on the basis of something that you might know or you learn from reading.
Yeah. Um, we're approaching the end of, I mean, our 30 minutes, but just a few things. Uh, where would professionals or even students, where would be a good resource for them to find credible papers online that they could read, find, and things like that, and maybe even contribute to, if at all. And I'm talking about not just the Indian audience, but global audience. That's one. And second is, for students or even professionals who really want to get into deep research, what would you kind of, where would you advise them to start?
I mean, the first thing is like from a very Indian perspective. I mean, the institutions in the UK and the US, they have usually got access to all those research databases where you can find those papers, and usually it is readily available through your library.
Yeah,
But for Indian students, I understand that it might not be the case because, I mean, the libraries do not want to invest in those new papers. But there are a lot of open access papers that are being published by different authors, not just Indian, but also other people across the world. And also, more often than not, there is a platform called ResearchGate, or even if you just look at the paper that is published, and if it is closed access, if you send an email to the corresponding author, unless he or she acts like a dick, they're probably going to send you that paper straight away on the
fair enough.
back of the email. I mean, as researchers, I mean, like we want people to read our research. So if somebody asks, of course, I'm going to send you a copy. Uh,
Yeah,
why not? You can read it. Uh, in terms of contributing, I mean, watch out. We're coming up something for the sport management space in India in the near future. Uh, I know you are a part of it as well. We're coming up with it, so of course I would ask people to keep and watch out for that. But apart from that, I mean, approach your teachers or approach the foreign professors who might come to give you guest lectures and specifically for Indian students, when you are going into research, the first thing, unless you are very good at it, should stop asking for is how much the stipend is. Because if I'm going to have to teach you something from scratch, I'm not going to be able to pay you because, I mean, it's rather you should pay me for teaching you that, but I'm not going to ask you that. I'm happy that you took the initiative and came to me and trying to collaborate on something and trying to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And you should, if you want to really do some research, probably treat it as a volunteering experience at the very first two or three instances. And after that, once
Yeah.
you gain some experience, probably then you can start asking for stipends. Like if somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, how much are you paying? Would you be able to pay me, say, 15,000 or 20,000 rupees a month?" I mean, it's lower than the average wage or median. That's a different thing. But if I'm paying you 20,000 pound, 20,000 rupees a month, I would expect you to probably work for me 2 days a week, and I would expect you to, if I'm doing quantitative research, I would expect you to be not an expert, but an intermediate research on SPSS, how to do different t-tests, how to run multiple discriminant analysis, how to run regression tests, and the same on Stata. Or if you're doing qualitative research, if you're asking for that sort of money, I would expect you to know what thematic analysis is, how to run codings on in vivo. So if you, unless you do not have that skills, even at a very basic level, no one is going to pay you or offer to collaborate with you. Because if I'm collaborating with someone who doesn't have those skills, and I'm happy to collaborate with anyone as long as they show real interest in that. But generally, if I am collaborating with someone who is not as skilled as they should be, they will be skilled at some point in time as they go through the process.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to probably take me more time to work on that project and work on that research than I would just be able to work on my own or work with experienced professionals. And I am all up for giving opportunities to Indian students if they have the right kind of attitude. And also for professionals in this field, as I said, watch out for the sport management space coming up with something substantially big that's going to benefit probably everyone.
Exciting, exciting times. Sarthak, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure there's. I mean, this is just a start. If correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot that's going to happen. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of things, especially in the sport management side and the academic side. And I'm glad you're somebody who's able to understand the Indian landscape, but at the same time sitting on the outside, kind of getting the experience, global experience that you already have. Amazing! Thank you for taking the time and joining us and giving us some honest opinions and good insights as well.
No worries. Thanks, Arup.